Before we start, I would just like to say thank you for clicking my video. It's been a struggle getting started on YouTube, so to me every view is worth its weight in gold. That being said, the entire internet only weighs in at about 50 grams, so that analogy doesn't really translate, but you get my point. Anyway, released in 1999, The Iron Giant is a timeless classic, and possibly my favourite childhood film. Coming even before the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Batman: The Dark Knight, and Fateful Findings by LeoBro.
I cannot believe you committed suicide. How could you have done this? How could you have committed suicide?
I watched it for the first time in years the other night, and by the end I was crying like a water fountain. The concept of the film is inspired by the book The Iron Man by Ted Hughes, who wrote the novel to comfort his children after his wife's suicide, using the giant's ability to rebuild himself after being damaged as a metaphor for the healing of their own lives. I have heard some criticism of the ending of this film, but I will explain why this fact makes me believe the ending is deeper and more meaningful than it seems to get credit for. There are many reasons this film is great, from the incredible blend of hand-drawn and 3D computer animation to the expressive and captivating acting. But the thing that makes this film beautiful is the metaphor within the character of the giant himself. Director Brad Bird, also known for his work on The Incredibles and Ratatouille, originally pitched the film with the question, what if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? The giant represents identity and the idea that you are who you choose to be, not what society expects you to be. Now, before I continue, I need to put a spoiler alert. If you haven't seen this film yet, I highly advise you go and watch it before you continue. Set in 1957, the height of American paranoia during the Cold War, the film opens with a meteorite hurtling towards Earth. It crashes into the North Atlantic Ocean, emerging from the water as a towering and ominous figure to the horror of an unfortunate fisherman. The fisherman somehow survives the encounter, returning to a cafe in the town of Rockwell, which is named in tribute to the American painter Norman Rockwell, famous for his critical depiction of American society. He tells his story to the locals, but it falls on deaf ears. Here, we meet Hogarth Hughes, named after the aforementioned author Ted Hughes. Hogarth is an energetic young boy with a curious mind. He is trying to convince his mother, Annie Hughes, to let him keep a squirrel he found as a pet. She concedes, but the squirrel escapes and crawls up the trousers of Dean McCoppin, a scrapyard manager and artist? No hate, Dean. I actually think your work is pretty cool. Later, Hogarth discovers a path of destruction through his backyard, leading into the forest. Being the curious person he is, he gears up and ventures out to discover the cause of this havoc. He encounters the giant, who is eating a power station. I used to pretend to eat breadsticks like this. The giant gets electrocuted when grabbing a power generator and becomes entangled in the power lines. Hogarth manages to switch off the power and save the giant. The giant collapses unconscious, where a small dent in his head is revealed, presumably caused by his impact from space. The next day, Hogarth goes out to find the giant once more. The giant, remembering that Hogarth saved him, becomes his friend. It soon becomes apparent that the dent in the giant's head has caused him to lose his memory. He is like a young child, and Hogarth begins to teach him about the world. It's getting late, and Hogarth needs to head home, but the giant tags on. Frustratedly, Hogarth tells the giant, "You stay, I go, no following," which shall come back to us later in the film. The giant continues to follow until they approach a railway track. Being the big boy he is, the giant needs food, and is about to eat the train track until Hogarth intervenes. Unfortunately, the giant has already bent it out of place, and he must now fix it before a rapidly approaching train is derailed. He manages to fix the track, but does not move out of the way in time, and the train strikes him at full force. Astonishingly, no one is hurt, but the giant lies in pieces. Here we learn that the giant has the ability to reconstruct himself. Hogarth and the giant flee the scene. Soon after, back at the Hughes house, we meet Kent Mansley, who is a caricature of 1950s American paranoia. He is sent by the government to investigate the cause of these strange events, and quickly becomes very dislikable. He presses Hogarth for information on the giant, but Hogarth is smart and realises that keeping the giant a secret is his best option for now. Clearly in need of food, Hogarth takes the giant to a scrapyard, where a disgruntled Dean agrees to let him stay the night. The next day, the trio take a relaxing trip out into nature, demonstrating the perfectly light comedic touch to this film. While wandering the woods with Hogarth, the giant meets a deer, who sadly is moments later shot and killed by hunters. This is the first time the giant encounters death, and he does not seem to comprehend what it is. Upon seeing the gun one of the hunters had dropped in panic, the giant's eyes focus and go blood red as he momentarily loses control of his critical faculties and enters what can only be presumed as the state of his original function. Foreshadowing events that will take place later, this is the first time we are introduced to the question, what if a gun didn't want to be a gun? We cut to later in the day. The pair are back in Dean's scrapyard. Hogarth explains to the giant that death must be a part of life, but that doesn't mean it has to be a bad thing, and we hear the emotionally stirring line.
Souls don't die.
The next day, Hogarth and the giant are role-playing. Hogarth pretends to shoot the giant with a toy gun, and the giant instinctively reacts, returning to his terrifying alter ego and almost vaporizing him. Dean, who must have an iron set of bollocks to do this, confronts the giant and tells him to leave as he's just a big gun. Upset at what he has just done, the giant runs away. As he's running, he spots a pair of boys about to fall from a building. In a demonstration of the giant's caring nature, he rushes in and saves the boys from their fate. It's at this point that the nearby army, called in by Kent and led by General Rogard, spot him and begin to attack. Thinking that the army has just killed Hogarth, the giant is triggered into a state of mad aggression, revealing he carries a terrifying array of alien armament. Unable to hurt the giant, the army retreats back into the town, where a battleship fires upon him. As the giant is about to obliterate the ship with his huge chest cannon, Hogarth intervenes, and he misses his shot. A huge green ball of plasma explodes beyond the horizon, demonstrating the giant's destructive capability and terrifying the American soldiers. Hogarth manages to calm the giant, and he returns to his normal, loving self. However, in a state of panic after witnessing this display, Kent snatches a radio from the general, ordering the release of a nuclear missile on the giant's position. The giant, aware that if the missile strikes it is going to kill everyone, knows that he is the only one who can save them. Repeating to Hogarth the lines he spoke earlier,
You stay. I go. No following.
he launches himself into the air towards the missile. The giant, remembering that it's not bad to die, is at peace with his sacrifice, and this is perhaps the most emotionally stirring moment of my childhood.
You are who you choose to be.
Sometime later, a small piece of the giant is recovered, which is gifted to Hogarth as a token of solace. That night, as he is trying to sleep, we see the piece reanimate, and it is revealed that the giant is still alive. People say that his survival takes away from the giant's sacrifice, and I see their point, but I believe that this opinion overlooks the message that Ted Hughes was sending in his original story, The Iron Man. The story is not just about choice and identity, but about hope and healing in the face of destruction, and that love makes love, and hate makes hate. His survival is an ode to this sentiment, and I think Ted Hughes would be delighted to see this. I also believe this film comments on the idea of nature versus nurture. The giant becomes benevolent perhaps because Hogarth teaches him to love, and I can't help but ask, what if he was found by someone with more vindictive intentions? Overall, I think this film is incredible. The mixture of 2D hand-drawn animation and the 3D computer animation of the giant is so seamless, I didn't even notice it until someone pointed it out. And in general, the movie just looks very pretty. The characters are acted brilliantly and are all compelling. If we are being really picky, Annie could have been a bit more interesting, but she was still voiced exceptionally well. It doesn't really take away from the story. The message of this film is so deep and strong, especially for a kids film, that I can't think of anything else quite like it. The Iron Giant is a masterpiece, and it's something you should all watch. I will remember it for the rest of my life. That's all for today. If you want to see more content from me, please like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it, and I'll do my best to make it worth your while. Thank you very much again, and I'll see you later.
Bye!